It's a strange thing, watching your wife turn into a stranger while she's sitting 3 feet away from you. It isn't a sudden metamorphosis, not a dramatic shedding of skin. It's more like watching a photograph fade in slow motion, the familiar colors leaching out day by day until you're left with a gray, unrecognizable outline of the person you once knew by heart. For me, the final tint of color vanished on a Tuesday afternoon. The house was quiet, filled with the lazy golden light of late afternoon. I was at the dining table, our makeshift office, trying to close out a quarterly report. The air was still, save for the low thrum of a bass line coming from the living room. Genevieve was in there, listening to some moody, atmospheric band she'd recently discovered. The music itself wasn't the problem. It was the volume. It vibrated through the floorboards, a persistent, fuzzy intrusion into the fragile bubble of my concentration. My phone buzzed. It was my boss, calling for a final review before the deadline. I gestured towards the living room, a silent plea. Genevieve was scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's cool light, seemingly oblivious. "Hey, Jen," I called out, my voice carefully neutral. "Could you turn the music down a bit? I have to take a work call." It was nothing. A normal request in a normal house on a normal day. It was a sentence I'd uttered 100 times before. Usually, it would be met with an eye roll and a sigh, a theatrical display of inconvenience before she flicked the volume down a few notches. But not today. She froze. Her thumb stopped its endless scroll. Her head lifted slowly, and her eyes, when they met mine, were unnervingly still. It wasn't the look of someone being asked to turn down the music. It was the look of a queen being asked to abdicate her throne. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a meaning I couldn't yet grasp. She placed her phone face down on the sofa cushion, with deliberate precision. Then the words came, not shouted, not emotional, but cold and deliberate, as if they had been rehearsed in the quiet chambers of her mind for weeks. "I don't belong to anyone. Remember that." "Oh." She paused, letting the sentence land, letting it sink into the wood of the table between us. "And stop telling me what to do. I will not obey you." I didn't blink. My mind, which had been wrestling with spreadsheets and profit margins, went completely blank for a moment, then rebooted with a chilling clarity. The spreadsheets didn't matter. The deadline didn't matter. This moment, this cold, polished declaration, was the only thing in the world that mattered. She wasn't just talking about music anymore. This was a creed, a verdict. My boss's face was still a small, expectant square on my phone screen. I held up a single finger, a silent request for a moment, my eyes never leaving Genevieve's. My own voice, when it emerged, was just as calm, just as measured as hers. It surprised me. "Got it," I said. "I'll cancel the dog collar I ordered." A flicker of something annoyance, confusion, crossed her brow. A tiny twitch. "Not funny, Julian." "And oh, I'm not joking," I replied, the words flowing with an ease that felt both foreign and liberating. "I was thinking leather, engraved with something classy, like property of no one. But you're right, waste of money now." She rolled her eyes, a familiar gesture. But this time it lacked its usual dismissive power. It was a shield, and I could see the cracks in it. She turned away and walked towards the kitchen, the set of her shoulders meant to signal a victory. She'd scored her point. She had asserted her independence. I let her walk. I wasn't in the business of chasing illusions anymore. I canceled the call with my boss, typing a quick apology about a domestic issue. He'd understand, or he wouldn't. It felt profoundly unimportant. I sat there in the silence, the echo of her words replaying in my head. "I don't belong to anyone. I will not obey you." It wasn't the sentiment that struck me. It was the delivery, the practiced, detached finality of it. It was the sound of a door being locked from the inside. And in that moment, staring into the fading afternoon light, I realized she had just handed me the key. She thought she was delivering a declaration of independence. What she didn't realize was that she was also signing my Emancipation Proclamation. That night, lying in the darkness of our bedroom, the space between us felt like a chasm. I listened to the sound of her breathing, steady and even, the breathing of someone untroubled by the earthquake she had just caused. I replayed her words on a loop, not with anger, but with a kind of surgical curiosity. I dissected them, examined their weight and texture. Somewhere between one thought and the next, between the memory of her cold eyes and the quiet hum of the house, a decision settled in my soul. It wasn't born of rage or spite, it was born of acceptance. If she doesn't belong to anyone, I would stop treating her like she belonged to me. No more speeches, no more door slamming, no more desperate attempts to bridge the growing divide. Just a quiet shift in how the game was played. Or rather, a quiet refusal to play it at all. The next morning, the world felt different. The air in our kitchen, usually thick with the unspoken negotiations of cohabitation, felt clean and sharp. I woke up first, a habit born from years of getting a head start on the day. My routine was an ingrained ballet. Start the coffee maker for 2, let the dog out, bring in the paper. Today, I changed the choreography. I took out 1 filter, measured coffee for 1 cup, and filled the machine's reservoir halfway. The silence of the house was my co-conspirator. As the rich, dark liquid dripped into my mug alone, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was a small act of rebellion, a quiet redrawing of the map of my own life. I was sitting at the table, reading the news on my tablet, when Genevieve walked in. She was wrapped in her silk robe, her hair a messy halo. Her eyes, still soft with sleep, went straight to the empty space on the counter where her mug usually waited, steaming and ready. Her brow furrowed slightly. "Did you forget mine?" Her voice was laced with an assumption of entitlement, so deep she didn't even notice it. I looked up from my tablet, took a slow sip of my coffee, and met her gaze. "Nope," I said simply. "Remembered." She tilted her head, a gesture of confused inquiry. And, I said, setting my mug down with a soft click, "I decided to stop doing charity work before breakfast." Her eyes narrowed. The softness vanished, replaced by a familiar glint of indignation. "Wow. Passive? Aggressive much?" "Not passive," I corrected her gently. "Just cost, cutting, my time, my energy. We're running a leaner operation now." She stood there for a moment, processing. It was as if I had spoken to her in a foreign language she vaguely recognized but couldn't quite translate. She huffed, a sound of pure frustration, and turned to make her own coffee, her movements sharp and jerky. The silent contract had been breached, and she didn't have the words to demand its reinstatement. That was the first domino. Over the next few days, more followed. I systematically trimmed the unnecessary habits, the 1,000 little acts of service that had become her silent safety net. The check-in texts I used to send around lunchtime, they stopped. When she called me in a panic one afternoon because she'd forgotten to mail a crucial package for her freelance design work, my response was no longer, "Don't worry, I'll leave work early and handle it." It was, "That sounds stressful. I hope you figure it out." The silence on the other end of the line was electric. The automatic, "Sure, whatever you want," in response to her dinner suggestions vanished. It was replaced with, "I'm not really in the mood for that. I'm going to make myself a steak." Genevieve noticed. Of course she noticed. She was an expert in the subtle currents of our relationship, a master navigator of my moods and habits. But she didn't comment right away. Instead, she watched me. I would catch her staring from across the room, her eyes narrowed in concentration, as if I were a complex puzzle she was trying to solve. Little glances when she thought I wasn't looking, trying to figure out what had shifted, what piece had been moved off the board. I didn't explain. I didn't reassure. I just let the silence stay. I let the empty spaces remain empty. I let the consequences of her forgotten errands be her own. The house grew quieter, but the quiet was heavy, filled with the weight of things undone and words unsaid. It was a silence that began to feel solid, something she could feel in the walls. Genevieve wasn't subtle. She never had been. By the middle of the week, she'd figured out I was playing a different game, or rather, not playing hers anymore. The old rules had vanished. There were no guaranteed compliments when she tried on a new dress. No instant responses to her sighs of frustration. No orbiting her like a satellite, waiting for commands. My attention, once a constant, renewable resource she could tap at will, had been disconnected from the grid. So, she shifted her strategy. If she couldn't get the energy she needed from me directly, she would generate it herself, hoping the display would be bright enough to pull me back into her orbit. First came the look upgrades. Suddenly, it was full makeup on a Tuesday morning just to run to the post office. Her hair, usually thrown into a quick bun, was now perfectly styled for a casual coffee with a friend. And the perfume, it was a powerful, expensive scent she usually reserved for parties, but now it announced her arrival in any room long before she physically entered it. It was a fragrant declaration of her own importance. Then came the louder laughs. She'd be on the phone with her sister, and peals of exaggerated laughter would echo from the living room. She'd watch a sitcom she barely paid attention to, letting out a loud theatrical giggle at a joke that wasn't even funny. It was all a performance, a series of little reminders that she could still fill the space with sound, even if I wasn't providing the prompt. She was trying to create a vacuum of glamour and joy that she hoped I would be drawn into. But I just kept reading my book, a silent, unimpressed audience of one. By Saturday, Genevieve realized her solo performances weren't having the desired effect. She needed a bigger stage, a live audience, and a co-star willing or not. She found me in the study, organizing old files. She leaned against the doorway, a pose she'd perfected over the years, one that was meant to look casual but was engineered for maximum effect. "Let's go grocery shopping together," she said, her voice light and breezy, as if she were suggesting a spontaneous trip to Paris. I looked up from a stack of bank statements. Grocery shopping had been my solo task for years. She hated it. This wasn't a request, it was a summons. I shrugged, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a debate. Sure, why not? The store was an assault on the senses. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled faintly of ripe fruit and other people's impatience, and the cacophony of squeaking cartwheels and crying children filled the space. Genevieve was dressed for a premiere. She wore a fitted black top, jeans that looked brand new, and heels in a grocery store. It was a walking press release declaring, "I am not like these other people. I am an event." She moved through the aisles like she was on a runway, brushing past people with just enough eye contact to be memorable, but not enough to be rude. I pushed the cart, a silent utilitarian accessory to her glamour. I found myself amused, watching her performance with the detached interest of a theater critic. She wasn't shopping for food, she was shopping for attention. At the Apple display, it happened. A man, probably mid-30s, with the kind of spotless white sneakers that scream, "I just discovered podcasts," stepped closer to her. He had an easy, practiced confidence. "You've got a good eye," he said to her, his voice smooth. "Those are the best in the bunch, the Honeycrisps." Genevieve gave him the smile. It was a masterpiece of social engineering, just polite enough to deny any accusations of flirting, but warm enough to invite them. "Thanks, I try." He lingered, making another comment about fresh produce being worth the hunt, his eyes appreciative. He wasn't looking at the apples. Then, with a final, charming nod, he wandered off. Genevieve turned to me, her chin lifted, her eyes sparkling with triumph. It was a checkmate move, or so she thought. "See?" she said, her voice a low, victorious murmur. "I still attract men. Better make sure you don't lose me." I picked up 2 of the apples he had gestured to, weighed them in my hands, and then dropped them into the cart with a dull thud. I met her gaze for half a second, my expression unreadable. "If you can be lost that easily," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the store's noise, "you were never my find to begin with." Then I pushed the cart forward, turning down the next aisle without breaking my stride. Behind me, there was silence. The specific kind of silence where you know someone is standing perfectly still, processing whether they should be insulted or impressed. I didn't look back to check. For the rest of the trip, her performance was noticeably toned down. There were fewer swinging hips, fewer lingering glances at strangers. But I could feel her eyes on me in every aisle, watching, recalculating her entire approach. The following week, an invitation arrived via text. A dinner party at our friend's house, Caleb and Nora. "Everyone's going to be there," Genevieve's message read, followed by a string of celebratory emojis. I knew what it meant. This was the main event. The grocery store had been a dress rehearsal. Caleb and Nora's backyard looked like someone had tried to copy a rustic dinner party Pinterest board and succeeded just enough to make you feel underdressed. String lights zigzagged overhead, casting a warm, flattering glow that hid the patchy lawn and made everyone look 5 years younger. A long, mismatched table was laden with enough food to feed a small village. Genevieve dressed like the event was sponsored by a luxury brand. She wore an emerald green dress that clung to her in all the right places, her hair styled in perfect, cascading waves. Her makeup was a careful balance of effortless and calculated. She moved through the crowd like she owned the night, greeting people with air kisses, her laughter just a little louder than necessary, designed to draw eyes. I followed at my own pace, carrying the bowl of quinoa salad I'd been assigned to bring. My blazer was casual but sharp. I wasn't there to compete, but I wasn't going to fade into the furniture either. From the moment we sat down, she was in full performance mode. Every story she told was animated, every comment perfectly timed to elicit a laugh. She leaned into conversations, her hand lightly touching a man's arm here, a woman's shoulder there, her head tilted just so to signal rapt engagement. And every so often, mid-laugh, her eyes would flick towards me for a fraction of a second. The silent, insistent question, "Are you watching?" I wasn't. I was deep in a conversation with Caleb about his new smoker grill, the rising price of charcoal, and whether cedar planks were a legitimate culinary tool or just a scam. I gave his topic my full, undivided attention. The inevitable moment came halfway through dinner. Caleb, buoyed by his second glass of wine, grinned down the table. "You two are awfully quiet tonight," he said, gesturing between me and Genevieve. "Looks like a first date." He meant it as an affectionate joke. Someone at the table chuckled, the awkward kind. I felt Genevieve's hand slide onto my knee under the table. Her nails brushed against my leg, a warning. "Don't you dare." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. I could feel the table's attention on us, waiting for the playful rebuttal, the loving eye roll. I gave them something else. "We're trying minimalism," I said, my voice even. "Very trendy this season." A few polite, confused laughs rippled through the group. Her nails pressed harder into my leg. "Oh, he's just kidding," she said quickly, her smile aimed at the group. A brilliant, desperate piece of damage control. She didn't look at me. "We've just been busy. You know how it is." "Busy," I repeated, finally turning to look at her, forcing her to meet my eyes. "Sure, that's one word for it." Her smile froze on her face, a perfect, glittering mask. Underneath it, I could see the panic. "What would you call it then?" she challenged, her voice dangerously sweet. I let the silence stretch, just for a beat. I let the others shift uncomfortably in their seats. Then I delivered the final line. "Quiet," I said, "and peaceful." The reaction was subtle but immediate. A couple of awkward smiles. Someone coughed. Nora suddenly became very interested in pouring more wine into glasses that didn't need refilling. Caleb, bless his heart, quickly steered the conversation back to a story about his last fishing trip, a desperate lunge for safe conversational ground. Genevieve pulled her hand back from my knee. I watched as she picked up her fork and stabbed a piece of grilled zucchini with far more force than was necessary. For the rest of the night, she overcompensated. Her laughs were louder, her compliments to others more effusive, her interruptions more charmingly timed. She was working twice as hard to maintain the illusion, performing for a panel of judges who, she feared, had already submitted their scores. When we left, she was still smiling for everyone else. But the moment the car doors closed, the mask dropped. The silence in the car was absolute. The 10-minute drive home was a masterclass in silent warfare. Streetlights slid across her face in quick, rhythmic intervals, illuminating the hard set of her jaw and the furious glint in her eyes. She stared out the passenger window, pretending to watch the suburban landscape blur by, but I could feel the anger radiating from her in waves. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. I refused to be the first to speak. Finally, just as we pulled into our driveway, she broke. "You didn't have to make it weird," she said, her voice tight and clipped. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence of the garage was deafening. "I didn't make anything weird, Jen," I replied, my voice calm. "I just stopped covering it with sprinkles." She turned to face me, her face a mask of indignation. "You know, everyone noticed. Caleb and Nora were asking if everything was okay." "Good," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Saves me the trouble of explaining later." Her exhale was a sharp, frustrated hiss, but she didn't say another word. She got out of the car and slammed the door, a small, petty act of defiance that I chose to ignore. The house was quiet when we got back inside. Genevieve went straight to the bedroom without a word, closing the door firmly but not locking it, her version of a statement, an open invitation to a fight she was sure she could win. I stayed in the kitchen. I methodically unpacked the leftover quinoa salad, putting it into a smaller container and placing it in the fridge. I wiped down the counters. The low hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, a steady, mechanical heartbeat in the tense house. I was buying time, letting her anger simmer, letting my own resolve solidify. I heard the soft padding of her bare feet on the hardwood floor before I saw her. She appeared in the doorway, her arms folded across her chest. She was leaning against the frame, just enough to look casual, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. The emerald dress was gone, replaced by pajamas, but the warrior queen was still very much present. "We need to talk," she said. It wasn't a request. I closed the fridge door, took my time walking to the kitchen table, and sat down. I gestured to the chair opposite me. All right, talk. She remained standing for a moment, as if deciding on her point of attack. Was this an ambush or a confession? Then she crossed to the other chair and sat, her back ramrod straight, her hands placed firmly on the table. You've been different lately, she began, choosing each word like it was a delicate, explosive component. And I don't just mean tonight. You've been distant, cold. I rested my elbows on the table, mirroring her posture, creating a sense of equal footing. You mean I've stopped playing my usual role? Her eyes narrowed. Don't twist my words, Julian. I'm not twisting, I'm clarifying. The role of the attentive husband, the satellite, the one-man support system, that role, I've stopped playing it because the lead actress informed me it was a one-woman show. Her hands tightened on the edge of the chair. I just want to understand what's going on with you. I feel like I don't even know what's in your head anymore. I leaned back, a small, humorless smile touching my lips. That's funny, because for years, everything in my head was on public display for you. My thoughts, my time, my attention. It was an open book, and it didn't seem to matter much to you then. You were too busy reading your own press. That's not fair, she shot back, her voice rising. Neither is being told. I don't belong to anyone. I won't obey you, like it's a mantra you're proud of, and then acting shocked when I finally believe you. You can't declare your secession from the union and then get angry when I stop paying federal taxes, Genevieve. Her lips parted, but for a moment, nothing came out. The clean, direct hit had left her momentarily speechless. She looked down, her gaze falling to the wood grain of the table, which she began to trace with her finger. Her armor was cracking. I didn't mean it like that, she said, her voice softer now, losing its hard edge. It was in the heat of the moment. I tilted my head, studying her. Maybe, but you never took it back. You doubled down. The grocery store, the party tonight, those weren't heat of the moment. Those were calculated moves. You've been living by that mantra, not just saying it. She continued to stare at the table, her defensive walls beginning to crumble. I wanted to feel like I wasn't losing myself, she whispered, like I could still be my own person. You could have had that, I said, my voice softening slightly. This was the heart of it, the tragic misunderstanding at the core of our decay. I never asked you to stop being you. I fell in love with you. I just asked you to show up for us. There's a difference. Being a partner isn't losing yourself. It's choosing to share yourself. Silence settled between us. It wasn't the tense, angry silence from the car. This was a heavy, thoughtful silence, the kind that hangs in the air like smoke after a fire, when all that's left is to assess the damage. Finally, she looked up, her eyes holding a flicker of genuine vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. So what happens now? I held her gaze, refusing to give her an easy answer. That depends. Do you actually want to fix this? Or do you just want things to feel the same so you're comfortable again? Her jaw tightened. I saw the flash of her old pride, the reflexive urge to fight back, to say something cutting, but she swallowed it. She looked at me for a long moment, a genuine, searching look. Then she gave a single, sharp nod. I want to fix it, she said. Then start by understanding this, I said, leaning forward again, my voice low and firm. I'm not going back to orbiting you. The sun and satellite dynamic is over. If you want a connection, you're going to have to walk toward me too. We meet in the middle, or we don't meet at all. She held my gaze, then nodded again. Another small, sharp movement. That night, I didn't follow her to the bedroom right away. I stayed in the kitchen a little longer, letting the words hang in the air where they belonged. When I finally went to bed, she was already under the covers, lying perfectly still on her side of the bed, facing away from me. She didn't reach for me. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel guilty about not reaching back. The morning after our kitchen table ceasefire, the house felt like a neutral territory. Genevieve woke up early. Not alarm clock early, but intentional early. I heard the soft slide of her slippers across the floor and the small chime of the coffee machine. When I walked into the kitchen, the table was set for two. Nothing fancy, just plates and folded napkins, as if she were trying to reconstruct civilization one breakfast at a time. Eggs? She asked, her voice careful, almost neutral. Sure, I said, sitting down. I'm pro-egg. She cracked them with exaggerated care, as if each shell might explode and prove me right about her lack of follow-through. We ate like diplomats, negotiating a fragile truce calm. Polite, with no binding treaty signed. It wasn't cozy. It wasn't hostile. It was deliberate. Over the next few weeks, the house shifted one notch toward functional. Her phone stayed face down on the counter when I walked into her room. That was new. She started asking about my day and then actually listening to the answer, not just waiting for her turn to speak. She swapped her grand, performative gestures for smaller, more practical ones. A post-it note by the door. Picked up your dry cleaning. The garage shelf I'd been promising to fix for months was suddenly fixed. The job clean, the screws matching. The junk drawer now had categories, which was both terrifying and impressive. I didn't reward any of it with fireworks. A simple thanks, a nod, then back to what I was doing. I was observing, not applauding. This was a test, and I wasn't going to grade it on a curve. But old habits die hard. They lie in wait, like predators in the tall grass. Twice, I saw her old tricks surface. Little tests to see if the old dynamic could be revived. Once she said, "I got 3 compliments on my hair today," dropping the bait into the conversation. I just looked up from my laptop. From actual people? She smirked but let it drop. The real test, the final, undeniable proof, came on a Tuesday evening in October. I came home from work with an envelope in my briefcase that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It wasn't just a job offer. It was the job offer. A senior director position at a fast-growing tech firm. Better pay, a better title, and a corner office in a city that didn't smell like damp leaves for half the year. It was in Denver. It was the kind of opportunity people wait years for. I told her over dinner. I laid it all out. The role, the salary, the generous relocation package. They want me to start in 6 weeks, I finished. It's big, General. For us. Then, she set her fork down slowly, the metallic sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. She looked at me as if I were about to break some terrible news to a child. Denver? She repeated, as if the word itself was offensive. As in, we'd have to move? I nodded. That's generally how geography works. Her nose wrinkled in a way that I used to find cute and now found infuriatingly dismissive. I don't know, Julian. All my friends are here. My yoga studio is here. The coffee shop, where they know my order, is here. I've worked hard for my comfort, for the life I've built. She paused, then delivered the killing blow. I'm not giving all that up just so you can climb another ladder. Just so I can climb another ladder. Not we. I. And there it was. The final piece of the puzzle I'd been waiting for. The last little confirmation that her we was a word of convenience, not conviction. She wasn't willing to give up anything meaningful for me, for us. Not even a latte loyalty card. Her entire world was constructed around her own comfort, and I was just another piece of furniture in it. I took my time finishing my drink, the ice cubes clinking against the glass. The silence stretched. She was watching me, expecting an argument, a negotiation, a plea. She was expecting the old Julian to show up and try to convince her. He was no longer employed here. Got it, I said finally, my voice flat. Then I gave her the words she wanted to hear. I guess we're not moving. Her shoulders eased. A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. She thought she'd won. She had successfully defended her territory. What she didn't know, and wouldn't for a few more days, was that she was right. We weren't moving. I was. I didn't announce it. The new Julian had learned that timing is an art, and patience is a better weapon than volume. So, I went about my week as if nothing had changed. Genevieve, buoyed by her victory, fell back into her usual orbit. Yoga in the mornings, a glass of wine in the evenings, and a constant stream of Instagram stories that screamed, "Look at my perfect, comfortable life." Meanwhile, I was making my moves in the shadows. Quiet calls to the hiring manager during my lunch break, scouring apartment listings in Denver while drinking my morning coffee, the screen angled away from her. Emails to lawyers, calls to the bank. By the time 2 weeks had passed, everything was lined up with military precision. Lease signed on a loft in Lodo. Job locked in. Mover scheduled for a very specific date. Bank accounts reorganized so cleanly, it was like I'd hired a magician. The joint account had exactly half of our liquid assets. The other half was now in an account under my name only. I had methodically untangled our lives without her ever noticing a single thread being pulled. All that was left was to hand her the envelope. That Friday, she breezed through the front door like she owned the oxygen inside. Her hair was curled in loose waves, her lipstick was fresh, and her perfume hit me a full second before her words did. She tossed her purse onto the kitchen counter with the kind of casual arrogance you only develop when you believe the ground you're standing on is permanent. "Guess what?" she chirped, kicking off her heels and wiggling her toes. "Some guy at the bar I just stopped for one quick drink with the girls thought I was 27. She turned to me, her eyes wide with feigned disbelief. 27, Julian. Can you believe that?" I was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. "Well," I said calmly, "you do have the emotional maturity of a 27-year-old, so it's an honest mistake." She frowned, unsure if it was a compliment or an insult. While she launched into a detailed recap of her brief, triumphant appearance at the bar, I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope and slid it across the cool marble countertop, placing it directly in her line of sight. Her words slowed, then stopped. She looked at the envelope as if it might contain anthrax. "What's that?" "Something I've been meaning to give you," I said, my voice even. "Figured tonight was as good a night as any." "Ugh." She tore the flap with a quick, annoyed motion, as if it were just another piece of junk mail. Her eyes darted over the first page. I watched her face closely. I saw at the exact moment the black letters on the white page formed a reality she had not even considered possible. The little crease between her brows deepened. Her shoulders stiffened. The victorious glow from the bar vanished, replaced by a pale shock. For the first time in a long, long while, she had no ready-made line, no clever comeback. "Divorce?" The word came out as a strangled whisper, her voice cracking in disbelief. Then the shock curdled into fury. Her eyes blazed. "Divorce?" "Correct," I said evenly. "No trial separation. No, let's work on it for 6 months. Just a clean exit. The papers are all filed. That's just your copy. It's happening. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," I replied. "Well, except maybe the day I said I do. In hindsight, that was a bad call." Her nostrils flared. "So you're just giving up? Throwing it all away?" The accusation was so absurd, it was almost funny. I pushed off the counter and walked over to the chair where my duffel bag packed and ready for the last 48 hours was waiting. I swung it over my shoulder. "Genevieve," I said, looking at her one last time, this stranger in my kitchen, "you have made it very clear, repeatedly, that you belong to no one. I'm just making sure I finally stop treating you like you belong to me. I'm giving you exactly what you said you wanted. Absolute freedom. Congratulations." She stood there, gripping the paper so tightly her knuckles were white, as if she could force the words to change through sheer will. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I allowed myself a small, final half-smile. "Maybe, but at least I won't be bored." I walked to the front door, each step on the hardwood floor, sounding sharper and more final in the silence than any door slam could have managed. My hand rested on the doorknob for a moment. Without turning back, I said one last thing. "Oh, and don't worry about forwarding my mail. I already changed the address." Then I stepped outside into the cool night air. It hit my lungs like a clean inhale after years of breathing recycled oxygen. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away without once looking in the rearview mirror. 3 months later. It's funny how quiet life gets when you finally cut out the noise. I was living in Denver, in a loft with exposed brick walls, 16-foot ceilings, and not a single throw pillow I didn't personally approve of. There were no scented candles that smelled like emotional manipulation, no decorative signs commanding me to live, laugh, love. There was just space and light and peace. The movers had unpacked my essentials in a day. Everything else, the wedding china, the monogram towels, the his and hers robes, was sitting in a storage unit back east, with her name on the lease. I didn't want a single thing in my new place that could whisper, "Remember when?" Work was better than I could have imagined. I was challenged, respected. Friends, real friends, started inviting me out again. It turns out I'm a lot more fun without someone rolling her eyes at every story I tell. I joined a weekend hiking group and discovered the rugged, breathtaking beauty of the Rockies. I started cooking actual meals for myself, not just survival food. And for the first time in years, I woke up without a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Last I heard, from a mutual acquaintance, Genevieve was still posting her perfect life on Instagram. But now the photos came with new captions. "Learning to love myself again," "New chapter vibes." Sometimes the greatest journeys are the ones we take alone. Translation. She was auditioning for her next audience. Do I miss her? I miss the version of me I used to be before I started spending all my energy orbiting someone else's ego. And now that I've got him back, I'm not letting him go. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city stretch awake under a brilliant, cloudless sun. The air was crisp and clean. Below me, the streets were coming to life, a gentle hum of possibility. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or someone to give me permission to live. I gave it to myself, and it was enough.